to. We're going to be getting into the first chapter of the book of Maccabees. I hope you read it. Understand that this was removed from the Protestant Bible. It used to be in the King James Bible, now it's not. This book is essentially a continuation of the book of Daniel. Many of the prophecies in the book of Daniel were continued in the books of Maccabees, which is of a period of. The book of Maccabees basically ends around 167 before Christ. Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, which appears to be the same as the Amalekites, the Hittite Empire, who came from the land of Kittim, which is Cyprus, which is one of the lands that the Hittites colonized. After he had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes, which is mentioned in the book of Daniel, he succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and slaughtered the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes, and they paid him tribute. After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying, so he summoned his most honored officers, who had been brought up with him from his youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. So this is actually a prophecy in the book of Daniel, that he leaves his kingdom to four heirs, not heirs, to four friends, not to his children. That four horns will arise from the one horn, something to that effect. It's one of the prophecies. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. So there was a great period of chaos under the Macedonian Empire, because this was a wicked civilization. This was not like Babylon, which, King Nebuchadnezzar was a cocky, narcissist. It wasn't like the Persian Empire. No, this was a wicked empire. These people were sodomites. They were doing black magic. I mean, their empire is abomination after abomination. We know what they've done to little boys in Greece. And from them came a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus, and he had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a..." So these are heretics to the law of Moses. Let's keep this in perspective. Not everyone who says he's a Jew is a Jew. There are many heretics of the law of Moses. Look at what George Soros did during the Holocaust when he was working with the Nazis gathering property of the Jews. And he said it was some of the happiest times of his life in the 60 Minutes interview. And what's George Soros doing now? He's financing Islamic immigration. He's financing these pro-Hamas movements. This is not a real Jew. This is a multi-generational Satanist, synagogue of Satan heretic, and he has no problem with killing Jews for his ambitions. Certain renegades came out from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, for since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us." This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nations. So they built a gymnasium, a gay wrestling house, essentially. Gay bath saunas, all that stuff, the exact same way it was in Greece. They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, according to the customs of the nations, and made foreskins for themselves. They uncircumcised themselves. They would stretch out their foreskin over their tip with like rocks and ropes and stuff. They made foreskins for themselves and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt in order that he might reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt. Now, there are many Ptolemies, so don't assume it's the one from the days of Julius Caesar. King Ptolemy in Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. After subduing Egypt, Antiochus turned back in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary, which is Solomon's temple. He took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. So he took the menorah and all the golden stuff. He took also the table, the bread of the presence, the cups for drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtains, the crowns, and the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took also the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. So they actually talk about this in the history books. They're not sure why Greece was so hostile to Judaism. The official story is that there was a confusion and they thought the priests were going to do like a revolution or something. But realistically speaking, there's no logical reason for why they were so hostile to Judaism, why they were forcing them to eat pork at the risk of death. They are terrified of the power of the law of Moses, just like they're terrified of the power of the cross. If you have the cross and you have the law of Moses, you will conquer your enemies with ease. So remember the burnt sacrifices, remember the Torah, and keep the Gospels. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Young women and young men became faint. The beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom took up lament, and she who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. Yeah, because he defiled the sanctuary. Not just what he did here, but he actually does satanic rituals in Solomon's temple to Zeus, to Bacchus, to Venus. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully he spoke peaceful words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David, which I believe is Zion, Jerusalem, with a large, strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful nation, men who were renegades. So these are enemies of the law of Moses. Who is the sinful nation? Probably the Amalekites. They strengthened their position, they stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. For the citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, Solomon's temple, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of strangers. She became strange to her offspring. Sounds like what happened to Jerusalem after the Romans kicked all the Jews out. And her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate like a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that they should all give up their particular customs. All the nations accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings of the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and festivals, to defile the sanctuary and the holy ones, to build altars and sacred precincts and shrines for idols, to sacrifice pigs and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make themselves abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the law and change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. Better to die than live like that. In such words he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors over all the people and commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice, town by town. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the law of Moses, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Israel into hiding in every place of refuge they had. Now on the 15th day of Chislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering, the abomination of desolation. Seems like what this was a sacrifice to Zeus. You can read about this also in 2 Maccabees chapter 6. The abomination of desolation appears to be worship of Zeus, who is the same as Jupiter, who is the same as Allah. Built altars, where was I? Desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering. They also built altars in the surrounding towns of Judah and offered incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The books of the law, and it wasn't just the law of Moses, it was anything Hebrew. It was anything related to the Hebrew history, anything Bible related. If it had Hebrew text, they would have destroyed it rather than understanding what it says. But here it just says, the books of the law that they found, they tore to pieces and burned with fire. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant or anyone who adhered to the law was condemned to death by decree of the king. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the towns. On the 25th day of the month, which is interesting, December 25th, on the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar of burnt offering, the altar to Zeus. According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised and their families and those who circumcised them, and they hung the infants around their mothers' necks. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean food. They chose to die rather than to be defiled by food and to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel. You can read about that in 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and 7. Many people were put to death for refusing to eat pork. They're trying to destroy Judaism. They're trying to destroy Christianity. That's what this is. That's what the Hamas protests are about. They want to exterminate the Bible from the face of the planet, and they will never win.